Welcome to Real Shame. It is a weekly show where we review movies off our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
Earlier in the week, we looked at a movie that I haven't seen yet called Cider House Rules, and we're going to follow that up with another movie based off a John Irving novel, and that movie is going to be
The World According to Garp.
Let's talk about what Garp thinks about the world.
Let's do it. So T.S. Garp is born in Maine in 1944 to a nurse named Jenny Fields. She's a strong woman with feminist ideals who has no need for a man or for marriage, but she does want a child. So she conceives one under very, very bizarre circumstances. As Garp grows up, because he's just referred to Garp, or just referred to by Garp, as Garp grows up, he desires to become a writer. So does his mother. They both become published authors with wildly different levels of success. His mother becomes a feminist icon, and her vast, spacious home becomes a haven for troubled women. Meanwhile, Garp marries and has children with his former classmate, Helen Home. Many interesting encounters and situations unfold for Garp, his new family, and his mother in The World According to Garp.
My husband doesn't putter. He's a writer. His novel was just published, Procrastination by T.S. Garp.
T.S. Garp? Not the bastard son of Jenny Fields. Oh, I loved your mother's book. Loved it. Oh, I keep buying them and my husband keeps burning them. Oh, and you write too. Isn't that nice? You must be so proud of your mother.
Oh, I'm very, very proud of Mom.
So The World According to Garp came out in 1982. It was directed by a man named George Roy Hill. He had directed some pretty eclectic stuff. He did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He did with Newman and Redford. He did The Sting with Newman and Redford. He did Slapshot with Newman. Little Romance. His final feature film was Funny Farm with Chevy Chase in the late 80s. He was also a pilot and airplane enthusiast. He was a licensed pilot, and he actually flies the plane in the movie that crashes into the house.
Oh, interesting.
And he's the pilot that gets out and says, "Hey, can I use your phone?" That's George Roy Hill. So John Irving adapted his novel Cider House Rules for the Cider House Rules movie. He wrote this novel in 1978, but he did not do the adaptation. It was adapted by a guy named Steve Tessich. But both novels take place in the 1940s, or at least start in the 1940s. Cider House Rules, in the movie anyways, goes from 1943 to 1945. This movie starts in 1944 and I guess goes all the way to the 70s, because at one point Robin Williams mentions the fact that he's 30 years old. I've seen World According to Garp a couple of times before, but I haven't seen it in quite a while. I think I saw it back in the 90s. Okay. And honestly, I watched it based on the strength of Leonard Maltin, because just like Cider House Rules, spoiler, he gave it 4 stars as well. So I haven't seen it in probably at least 20 years or more, so that it was revisiting it after a while. But what did you think about Garp's World?
This is my first Garpning.
First Garp.
I've never experienced Garp before. What do I say? This movie is crazy. This movie's insane. I was trying to relate to Kirby all the things that happened in this movie, and each one is more preposterous and more crazy than the last. Mm-hmm. I thought the first half of this movie was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed all the Garp as a kid with his mom, Glenn Close. This was like her acting debut. Mm-hmm. I thought she was amazing in the beginning of the movie, and that the hilarious and the tone of the first half of the movie I thought was awesome, and I was so excited to see the rest of the movie. I was cackling and howling at all the right parts. I thought it was great. And then it jumps into Garp being older, and it shifts into a more dramatic movie, which is not necessarily bad, but boy, did it lose me. It just seemed completely different, just completely out of left field. And also in the latter half of the movie, you have all these incidents and things that are happening one after each other that are, like I said earlier, more preposterous than the last, and it just kind of left me like, I have no idea what's going on, and it kind of lost me. So I'm kind of struggling with how I feel about the movie because I really, really adored the first half so much, and the last half was just completely just left me out there. So I don't know. I guess it's okay. they kind of mellow each other out, and so that's where I kind of fall in it. So you've seen it before. What do you think about this? What do you think about it?
Opposite. I don't like the first part as much whenever he's a kid. I think the whole movie's pretty funny. And not always funny because it's necessarily funny, but because it's just so crazy. And some of it's actually not funny, but it's still funny, if that makes sense. But the part where he's a kid to me kind of drags. I was waiting for him to become Robin Williams. And then I do agree with you. It becomes more episodic in nature. It's just like, it covers a lot of ground.
Trying to fit a lot into a little
because
bit of time.
I was like, how old is he now? And I was like, what decade is it? What year is it? Because they don't ever really say.
Yeah.
He at some point mentions the fact that he's 30 years old, but that's really the only clue that you have as to when it's taking place or whatever. Because I didn't really notice a lot of makes and models of cars or anything like that. I mean, you see the guy driving the truck crazily in the neighborhood or whatever, but
nothing really comes of that.
No, I mean, again, it's more episodic than anything else. But I just think the wackiness, the zaniness, if you will, of this movie is what makes it watchable for me. I think the ending is extremely abrupt and comes out of nowhere, and I don't I don't really like the way that it ends. But other than that, I do like the kind of crazy stuff, even the tragic stuff that happens to Garp. Yeah. And I think more than anything else, I like this movie a lot because I think Robin Williams is great in this movie.
Yeah, I think it's strong.
A lot of people have not seen or heard of this film, and they feel like Robin Williams didn't start doing serious roles until Dead Poets Society, or arguably Good Morning Vietnam, although he still does a lot of his shtick in that movie, though it's a more serious Vietnam film. But in this movie, he doesn't hardly do any of his shtick that that you think of when you think of Robin Williams. I think he plays it very straight, and I think he does a great job. And I was surprised that he didn't get at least some kind of nomination, some kind of acting nomination at the Oscars. He did not. Glenn Close got a nomination.
Which I think was deserved.
I do too. And John Lithgow got a nomination.
Which is, I don't know why.
For Best Supporting Actor, although he plays a woman in this movie. He's a former Philadelphia Eagles tight end. Formerly Robert, now he's Roberta. He's one of the many women. Although, and he has fully transitioned, so he is now a woman. Yeah. He hangs out at Jenny Fields' main estate, basically, her home, where the Ellen Jamesians and all kinds of other people hang out.
Yeah, and I think the movie's kind of maybe dated in its portrayal of a person that's transsexual, I think is the correct term. And obviously we're learning and coping and trying to understand all this stuff as it happens in society. So forgive us if we misspeak or say something that's rude. We're not trying to at all. Kirby's shaking her head at us, but I feel like at the beginning of the movie I really understood what Glenn Close wanted to do, and I do feel like the movie explains a little bit more her overbearingness more than Wilbur did in the Side-House Rules, because both Wilbur and Glenn Close's character kind of have the same kind of love for their child, right? And overbearingness, right? Point. Yep. So I feel like with Glenn Close, you kind of get it and you understand it a little bit more. But I feel like when they do the New York thing, that's when the movie starts falling apart for me, because it feels like the stint in New York doesn't it's like why you don't get any. You get the reason why Robin Williams wants to move to New York is because he wants to be a writer and he wants to experience the real world. But the fact that his mom's like, okay, I'm going to go too. It's like, when did you ever want to be a writer? Like, we kind of get the seeds of it with Robin Williams saying he wants to write. He's written short stories. He's trying to impress, Helen Holm by writing stuff like that. And he tells her that if she, would she marry him if he became a writer? So that's kind of built up. But all of a sudden it's like, Glenn Close is like, yeah, I'm going to do that too. And it's like, okay, what? Why? And I'm going to move to New York with you. And it's like, it doesn't really explain. And then that's where the movie kind of gets where it feels like she's kind of trying to one up him the whole time and stuff like that. And it's kind of weird. I don't get it.
I don't know about that. I mean, I felt like she just wanted to go with him because she still wanted to be around him, because she is kind of overbearing and doesn't want to lose touch with him or whatever. But then once her book takes off and is like this enormous success, she kind of has to separate herself from him because she has all these followers and all these fans and everything else. and she kind of adopts them, and now they're all her children, like the Ellen Jamesians that hang out and everything else. I love his Magic Glove story because I love the visuals for it. The guy's up on the balcony and he starts playing the piano, and then he jumps down onto like the padding that they have set up for him, but then the piano falls
on him.
I thought that was hilarious.
And the girl's like, "That's the most saddest thing I've ever read."
Right, and he loves it. He's like, "Yes, I did it." Yeah, and she finally agrees to marry him because he's now a published writer. But no, I like the wackiness of the movie, even if it's not the most cohesive kind of thing. I love the zany. I keep saying wacky and zany. I can't think of two other words to describe it besides that. But I mean, it really is. It's got some crazy things like the plane flying, crashing into the house, and he's all excited about it.
And the plane I can get, but it just seems like they just want to keep on plussing it for each event.
Yeah,
well, he has
again. I never read the novel, and maybe that's just John Irving's style. He has a lot of crazy stuff happen in his novels, but I like it just for that reason because it does take all these kind of it veers this way and it veers that way in ways that you might expect. I was going to mention, so apparently John Irving, at least in the movies, I don't know if it's the characters have the same name in the books. He likes alliteration. He loves alliterative names. So you got Helen Home in this movie. The poor graduate student or gradual student, Michael Milton. Yeah. You don't want to know what happens to him. In Cider House Rules, you had Rose played by Erykah Badu. You had Wally Worthington, which was Paul Rudd. You had Candy Kendall, which was Charlize Theron. He loves that alliterative stuff. But yeah, I mean, again, some of the stuff is tragic. Like when Michael Milton, the grad student, gets his horrible thing.
His comeuppance? No, maybe?
Well, man, that's a hell of a comeuppance.
That whole sequence,
it's shocking.
It is complete. I mean, you know what's going to happen because they've done a good job of laying the groundwork. This is what happens. But when it's building up, I'm like, no, they're not going to do this. And it's like the movie's like, oh yes, we're doing this. And I'm like, no, you're not going to go there. And they're like, no, we're going there. And the movie is just like, I don't know. I don't want to say revels in it, but the movie is just like goes there, and you're just like, what am I watching? And then that still frame on the kid is just like so over the top and stuff like that. And it's just like, what is going on?
I remember the first time I saw the movie, I was like, what? Yeah, what is going on when it freezes and zooms in slowly on the child's face? Yeah. And I was like, why are they doing that?
And I think we're trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, I don't really want to give too much away with this movie just because it's so crazy. I feel like it's worth seeing at least.
And then I just feel like, and then the next things that start happening are even crazier that go on in this movie. And like you, I think the ending just comes out of nowhere. It actually feels like a completely different movie, just the kind of the way it's shot and stuff. And like I said, it's the hardest thing for me is and I was talking to Kirby about this a little bit, is like for me, I relate this a lot to Forrest Gump, right? Because I feel like Forrest Gump, you have this person that's lived an extraordinary life, right? And you have Forrest Gump doing all these amazing things where he's like a all-American college football player. He's gone to Vietnam. He's met a couple presidents. He's gone on world tours of ping pong. He's invested in Apple, not the fruit company, stock and all that kind of stuff. And he does, but in the movie, you feel that's believable and stuff like that. But in this movie, I am just like, man, this guy's just throwing the kitchen sink at this, and it just doesn't feel cohesive and believable. It just feels like
I don't know. Yeah. I think it's surreal enough that it's just you kind of just take it like that. Just whatever can happen to this guy happens, and you just kind of buy into it. And I like how because the Ellen Jamesians play kind of a prominent role in the movie, but finally at the end or towards the end they kind of wrap that up because he finally meets Ellen James. He finally finds her. She's been incognito the whole movie. Nobody knows where she is. Played by Christopher Plummer's daughter Amanda. Don't call her Honey Bunny like in Pulp Fiction.
Yep.
But I like the way that they kind of wrap that up. There's some other interesting character names in the movie, like Pooh. Pooh spies on them a lot.
And that was just so weird. You see her do it a couple times, but what comes of that? It just kind of disappears.
Well, isn't Pooh the one at the end? I think is that Pooh at the end?
See, I thought Pooh was Ellen James for the longest time.
No, I think Pooh is the one at the end, the abrupt end.
Do you think so?
I thought because she has the glasses. like Pooh does the rest of the movie.
Yeah,
I thought it was. I think at that point she had become an Ellen Jamesian because she points them out at the funeral and she can't talk because she cut her tongue out.
Yeah.
So just like T.S. Garp, Tail Gunner Sergeant Garp, after a while she can only say art, art, and she says art, art, like when she's pointing him out. So there's kind of a callback to what Glenn Close was talking about when she was telling the story to her parents, who were played by Jessica Tandy and Hugh Cronin. Real life couple for over 50 years. Cocoon, anyone? Batteries Not Included, anyone? Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, this movie just threw too many curveballs for me to kind of stay on with it. It kind of threw me off. And
fair enough.
I wish it kind of kept with that kind of slightly irreverent kind of humor of it. And I think that extraordinary things that happen would have fit better if it was more of a comedy than turning into a dramedy. But that's just my 2 cents on it,
Got it. I mean, and that makes total sense. I mean, I get more where you're coming from with World According to Garp than I do with Cider House Rules. Yeah. I'll say that for sure.
And I was so on board with the first part of it. Like, I thought it was so cool and so fun, and I was like, oh man, this is so refreshing. Like, oh man, compared to Cider House Rules, and I was like, oh.
And they're like, damn it, they screwed it up.
My soul died a little bit.
So the rest of the cast, rounding them out, Helen Holm is played by Mary Beth Hurt. She was formerly Mrs. William Hurt, which is where she got the Hurt in her name. She was married to William Hurt for about a decade. Now she's married to Paul Schrader, writer and director Paul Schrader. I wonder what she thought of First Reformed.
No, I don't know.
Remember that with Ethan Hawke?
No.
Oh, I thought you watched that. Okay. Well, anyway, never mind. For some reason, I thought you watched that, and I watched it, and I was like, "What was that?" It's kind of weird. Anyway.
Oh no, that was the trailer Kirby brought up. Because that's the Ethan Hawke and the was it Kevin Bacon or?
I don't think Kevin Bacon.
Was that the one where
that's Murder in the First.
Oh, Murder in the First.
No. First Reformed is where he plays the priest and he wraps barbed wire around himself.
I did see First Reformed.
Okay, yeah.
It's
I like
weird. First Reformed. Yeah, it's weird. Sorry. Yeah.
Compare that to Murder in the First.
I wonder. Well, I wonder what she thought of that. It's got Swoozie Kurtz. You gotta love that name. As she's just credited as the hooker. On IMDb because they never say her name. John Irving. So George Roy Hill, I mentioned, plays the pilot that crashes into their house. John Irving actually plays the wrestling referee because Garp likes to wrestle, or he's part of the wrestling team. John Irving plays the wrestling referee, and the wrestling coach is played by a guy named Brandon Maggart. And you're like, who the hell is Brandon Maggart? Well, he's got a famous daughter by the name of Fiona Apple. So that's who Brandon Maggart is. He's also in a really cool early 80s horror film, which predates Silent Night, Deadly Night, called Christmas Evil, where he plays a psychopathic Santa Claus. Far different role than the wrestling coach that he plays in this movie. In this movie, he's very nice and sweet, and also the dad of Mary Beth Hurt's character. They're the home team.
The home team. I like that alliteration.
I do too.
Or not alliteration, but I like that turn of phrase, I guess.
Yeah. So in addition to, we talked about Cider House Rules and World According to Garp. Those are two novels that John Irving had adapted. He's also had a novel called The Hotel New Hampshire adapted, which was another 80s film. I've actually not seen it.
Never heard of it.
A Prayer for Owen Meany is a novel he had, which was adapted into a movie called Simon Birch. And
seen Simon Birch.
Apparently the first third of his novel, A Widow for 1 Year, was adapted into the movie The Door in the Floor in the mid 2000s. So those are all the adaptations of John Irving's novels into movies. It is 78% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, 79% audience score, 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert, and again, Leonard Maltin. Cider House Rules and World According to Garp. He must love John Irving. He both gave him 4 stars.
All right.
So, yippee.
Well, if you feel different about the World According to Garp, shoot us an email. Let us know, realshame@gmail.com. If you're watching this YouTube, leave a comment below. Start a discussion. That would be cool. But before we end the podcast, we always like to answer a viewer question on our Wednesday's emails. And since we're talking about novels and adaptations of them, we wanted to know, what is a novel that you feel like needs a movie adaptation, or what's a novel that has a poor adaptation and you want to see a better one? So I kind of have one that I would like to see, but let's kind of go through our rolling list a little bit.
Well, I think if you're talking about novels that deserve a better film adaptation, most people that read a lot of novels are like, all of them, right? Because everybody's always like, the movie's never as good as the book. And yeah, that may be true because you just can't ever fit as much into the movies as you can in the book. At least not in one movie. You might can spread it out over 3 movies or something like that. You know, a la Lord of the Rings or whatever. But
Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter, exactly. But it's hard to cram everything from a book into a movie. But I do feel like the first thing that jumps out at me is most of Stephen King's novels deserve better movies than they have, including The Shining.
Oh,
I can't.
She's out.
But I think the new It was good. Not part 2 or chapter 2, but the first new It was
he's
good.
got some. I mean, there's some good ones, and I think The Shining is cool looking, and I think it has a lot going for it. But I still think they could do better. I still think they could.
It's not an adaptation of his novel because the TV movie's closer to his novel,
right?
From what I understand. And Doctor Sleep, we thought was good, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
But then you have stuff like Firestarter, which is awful. Carrie is okay, but
I'm missing a lot of his movies.
Carrie's De Palma, so you're already thumbs down for you. No, but I mean, I feel like because I watched Carrie not too long ago. I mean, I've seen it before, but I rewatched it again more recently, and I feel like there's a lot of things in that movie that could be done better. Although I know there's
like a remake, right?
To a lot of people, out? There is, and I've never seen it, but I heard it's wretched. And then there's like a remake, and then there's like sequels and all kinds of stuff. And I know some people swear by Carrie with Sissy Spacek and think it's just amazing. I think it's okay, but I think it could be better. But forget that. There's plenty of Stephen King novels I feel like that are just crappy. Cat's Eye? Stephen King Cat's Eye?
Yeah,
There's Pet Cemetery, there's Christine, there's Roadkill?
Maximum Overdrive. Maximum Overdrive is awful. But it's funny. Yeah. I mean, it's fun to watch and make fun of. But
for me, like in the horrible category, I think the Hobbit movies from the single Hobbit book is like way too much. They should have just made a single movie that's overblown. It's terrible. They added uninteresting things. It's a CGI mess. Why did he try to do 60 frames a second? It was just it was terrible, overblown. So I think The Hobbit needs a good live action version of it for sure.
So before I say what movie, so I've got a movie in mind, a book in mind that has never had a movie adaptation that I feel like needs it. But before I say that, I think there are at least 2 books that I have read that you should never make a movie of.
Oh.
And that's Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. I feel like that would be impossible to make into a movie and have it be good. But I'm biased because I think that book is phenomenal. I just think it would be very difficult. And I don't think they've ever really seriously tried to make it into a movie. And then A Confederacy of Dunces is another one.
Is that Douglas Adams?
That is not. It's John Kennedy O'Toole. Okay. It's the only book he ever wrote. Well, I think he has a posthumous book that came, or I think maybe both of his books were posthumous, but the second one was more unfinished, and it was just kind of published like an unfinished work. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, yeah, those 2.
I don't know anything about him, so
yeah, I don't know much about him other than he wrote that Confederacy of Dunces, which I think is a very good book, but I think it's impossible to translate to the screen.
So my movie that I want to, or my book that I want to turn into a movie, and this is probably going to be very hard to adapt, is, and maybe shouldn't be adapt if we're talking about that stuff, is Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves. This is a novel that came out in the early to mid 2000s, and it is awesome. It is the most scary thing I ever read. I've talked, with my friends about some of the experiences I had while reading it, and it was very, very scary. The fact that my power went out while I was reading that book adds to its scariness for sure. There's a movie that just came out this year called You Should Have Left with Kevin Bacon. It looks like it borrows a lot from House of Leaves. I read that You Should Have Left is an adaptation of something else, a German film, I believe. But boy, looking at the trailer, you would think this is House of Leaves, and it's not. But I would love to see a good version of House of Leaves. It'd probably be done better as a serial. In fact, I even tried to write a short film about House of Leaves. That's how much I liked it. So that's my novel I would like to see turned into a movie or Serial.
And this is the guy that wrote it is the brother of Poe, the singer. Is that right? Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about the novel. I've never read it. I should get on it.
I'll let you borrow it.
Hopefully my power won't go out while I read it.
it's not a good thing. All right. So what about you? Where are you following
So
this?
I read a book back in the early 90s by an author named Robert R. McCammon called Boy's Life. And this is the kind of movie that is right up Steven Spielberg's alley. It's about a young boy who lives in like a small Alabama town back in the 50s or 60s. I can't remember the exact decade, but somewhere around there. Has all kinds of weird, mystical kind of things happening in the town. And it's really, really moving. It's really adventure film. I mean, again, it seems like the perfect kind of film for Steven Spielberg. Maybe he has looked into making a movie of it at one time, but the book itself is probably about 30 years old, and there's never been a movie adaptation. And I feel like if somebody like Spielberg or somebody like that got a hold of it, it would probably be pretty damn good. If it's nearly as good as the book, it would be pretty amazing, I feel like. So Boy's Life by Robert R. McCammon would be my pick to make into a film, for sure.
Sounds awesome.
Great book.
Spielberg, if you're out there, get the rights to that book. Make the movie.
Do it.
Next to you have like 2 projects a year. You're crazy busy.
Right.
But you still make great films. All right. Well, if you have a novel, book, short story that you think would make a great movie, let us know. Shoot us an email, realshame@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment below, start a discussion. That would be cool too. If you have a question you want us to answer on air, also shoot us an email and we will answer those on our Wednesdays episodes. Follow us on social media at Real Shame and do all that kind of stuff. Like, subscribe, share, tell your sister about us, tell your mother about us, do all that kind of fun stuff. And stay tuned next time as we cross another movie off our list of shame. And we'll see you next time, guys. Thank you.